You know, when I was a kid, my mother used to wake me up. She'd sing a little, not a song. It's kind of a song. It was like, "Uppy, uppy, where's my puppy?" So maybe I'll do that for you guys since you're just getting out of bed. "Uppy, uppy, where's my puppy?" All right, let's do this. So, mine would spray water at me. Well, I mean, that's more for cats, but but it works. It's effective. Okay, so we're going to do auditing today. This is actually a little complementary to some of the stuff that we were doing in 2509 with event logs, right? It's just now it's kind of at the domain level. How can you manage, configuring security auditing? So that's what we're going to cover today. And there's a teensy little assignment which comes with it. So this one's even easier than the one that we did for Windows Admin Center. Okay, so let's get to this. Okay, so when we want to audit items, Microsoft actually has this giant list of things that, events that they suggest that we audit. And I've discussed that a little bit in 2509, where they have some recommendations for workstations, but they also have them for servers, right? So account logon events would be one of the big ones. So those are like official logins, but there's lots of other things that show up there. So there are other types of logon events, like logging on through a share or setting up a scheduled task. Um, all of those are kind of up for grabs in terms of, being leveraged for a security incident, and therefore you might want to track them, right? The creation of accounts is also something that's kind of handy to watch out for. So if anybody adds a user to a group or they create a new user altogether, you can actually track those and get alerts or have software that will just kind of parse through that. Okay. And that can include things like resetting passwords, um, and even changing passwords. So, there's the control alt delete. I'm going to change my password. You can log that, but you can also log it when someone overrides a password. And you can also track who's accessing Active Directory users and computers, who's going in and reconfiguring audit policy. So if they're trying to disable something so it's no longer noticed, that can actually be audited as well. Okay. And then who has access to files and folders? That's kind of going into advanced security, but you can enable logging of that, and then you could set it up on particular folders. Okay. So this link here will take you to where Microsoft has recommendations for audit policy, and I've got that opened up here somewhere. Is that it? Nope. Maybe. Nope. Nope. What did I just do? Oh yeah, there it is. Okay. So this is Microsoft's audit policy recommendations, and if you go on down and drill down, here they've got Windows 10 like client systems essentially, right? And there's a whole bunch of them. This is not to say that you have to do all of these, right? Uh, they have they show you what the Windows default is. They show you what the baseline recommendations are, and if you want to go more paranoid, right? And so you can kind of decide for yourself, as an organization, what you feel like you need to turn on and watch, right? And so those are the clients, and these are the server settings that they're recommending. They go up to Windows Server 2016 here, but you could easily carry this forward to all of the newer operating systems until they publish, more up-to-date information. I don't think this is out of date. They just haven't really stated. Basically, if there's no change, they usually just keep the file static, the documentation. So I don't, this applies to Windows Server 2019, 2022 as well. Okay. Now, some of this you're going to look like audit DP API activity, and you're going to be like, well, I don't know what that is. So the DP API is a data protection tool, by the way. But if you don't understand what it does, you could turn on auditing for it, but because it's not going to hurt other than taking some resources just to constantly track it. But you don't have to, right? Like if it's outside of your understanding and scope, you could always decide, well, are we really going to need it? Um, if you're getting a little paranoid, just turn them all on, right? All the ones that they recommend. So, and then you could figure it out later. Okay, now if you want to get a lowdown on, what policies are configured, you could use AuditPol, which is an old tool. It's been around for a while, but there is a nice little command here where you can get all the different types of policies and how they're configured currently. Okay, that's nice if you're just trying to generate a little report. You want a quick lowdown. Um, then here we're just, oops, here we're just, this is looking for all categories, but you can also do specific ones like file settings, right? File system, um, and just get data related to that. So star captures everything, which I would probably do, and then I would just filter through it myself. But if you want to generate reports in a particular way, you could actually massage that down further. Okay. Now, excuse me. When you're actually looking, so you've turned on group policy, where do you go for all of this? Typically, you're looking in the event viewer, and we've covered that very well in 2509, uh, ad nauseum if you include the lab. So you're probably sick of looking at events. So I'm not gonna kill you with this one. But the idea here is you can go to the event viewer. The classic event viewer is usually where you go when you're configuring group policy, but it's not the only game in town, right? There is still applications and services, and you can control that to some degree. So once you've set up the basic policies, you want to start tracking those in the event viewer. And filters are a good way to do that, but there's also automated tools. You could PowerShell it. You could actually call on services, third-party services that will run through all of this for you and alert you to any kind of event IDs that you consider to be important. Okay. Now, to get this applied across your domain, you want to use group policy, right? So that's our main way of configuring all of this. And there's the different contexts. So there's OU and domain, site and local. Really, you want to stick with domain. So for the domain-wide um, configurations, and then OU. So if you're dealing with servers, they're probably going to be in a single OU or a subset of the OUs that you have in your organization. And you can just tie a group policy associated with servers to those, right? Which will just handle the auditing for server level events. And then for the clients, you can do the same thing. It doesn't have to be domain wide, but if you've got a common set of things that you want to log for all the time, you just put that at the domain policy, right? Now, this is leaving out domain controllers. Those can have their own sets of policies, which as an organizational unit, you can apply specifics to those as well. Okay. Now, when it comes to going to GPO and where you drill down into, uh, this kind of cuts it off a little bit here, but let me just get into the VM. I've locked my screen. Hold on a second. Yeah, let's kill that. Let's kill that. Yeah, okay. So, I just went into the default domain policy here. I went to edit it, and you go to computer configuration, right? Go down into policies, Windows settings. This is under security, and you want to go into local policies, audit policy. Okay, so you do have to drill down a little bit, but this is where you can do the basics. Okay, um, as you can see, there's not that many policies here, but it does cover the ones that they think people are more likely to want to use. Okay. So account logon events, account management, these are the ones they're kind of highlighting, right? And we'll get back to other ones in a second, but that's really where you go to play around with these. Now, as an example, one of the objects that, or one of the policies you can set is auditing object access. And object access just means an Active Directory object. So that could be a user account, that could be a computer, that could be an organizational unit, right? Where the settings are being reconfigured on that particular object. And so if you want to, right now it's not defined, and typically that won't be logged. Okay. If you're not sure about whether it's being logged already, you can just go over to it. Um, let's just take one example here. And you just say, go to the explain section. It'll give you a detail of, what it means if this is turned on and what it means if it's turned off. Okay. So that's how you can kind of decide whether you want to massage these or not. They may already be in a good state. Okay. So, uh, you can then decide whether you want to audit the successful change. Like, so in other words, somebody has successfully uh, made changes to the object, or they tried and they failed, right? You can do one or both, one or the other or both, really, right? And now, most of the time, somebody who's going to try and make a change to an Active Directory object is going to succeed. Um, so a failure attempt, it may be interesting to you, it may not, but it's going to occur a lot less frequently. On the other hand, a file system access failure is going to be much more common, right? And then you have to decide, do I want all this cruft filling up my event logs? So that's another thing that'll determine what you're going to actually do with all of these. Okay. Now, setting up basic auditing on a folder, you can go into the file system itself and set it up there. So if we go back to our handy dandy virtual machine here, and we just look at the perf logs, which is just a default folder, which happens to be on Windows. And we want to go into security. You want to go into advanced security. And then you'll notice that there's a tab here called auditing. You actually have to go in and turn this on, right? So um, if we want to actually add some auditing, we have to select who we're auditing for. So we could say, I want to know if any administrators are accessing this particular folder, you know, and I want this folder and any subfolders and files within it. Right? Let's see. I don't need advanced permission. I think we could just leave the basic permissions. Add a condition to limit the scope of the auditing entry. So let's just try and use that user. Uh, yeah, let me just see what they did. We're keeping that the same. Add an entry for audit shared type success, this folder. Not too sure about that. Let me see. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so I don't think they really played around with any kind of conditions here. So they're just saying anybody who's accessing this, we want to know. We can add a condition if we want to fine grain it a little further, but we're just going to leave it for everybody, I think. Yeah, okay. So now we have an auditing entry, right? And so anytime anybody from administrators group tries to access this, then we're going to get a result for that. Okay. But now we also may have to turn on auditing, uh, like the registration of audits in the event log. Okay. So The fact that we say we're auditing it doesn't mean that we're actually going to, it's going to show up in any kind of aggregated way anywhere. Okay. So that's where filtering can come in though. So as we turn on more audits, we're going to get more entries. There's going to be more, uh, if you talk about needle in a haystack, there's going to be more hay that's produced, right? And so we've talked about filtering in 2509, and you can also use PowerShell and other kind of tools. Um, but basically, if you know what the event ID that you're looking for is, then you can go through that and um, filter on those particular IDs, right? You can also filter by users if you're interested in that. Um, Now here they've got a list. Let me just turn it. This is something that we looked at already or was in the appendices of one of the exercises, where Microsoft gives another listing of events to monitor. Okay. Now, this is not customized to, this is typically on a server side. Okay. But this is also something to consider. Now, in this case, we've got somebody accessing an audited folder. In this case, it's Ernie. Um, so Ernie J attempted to access the folder that was set up earlier. And there's the question of whether they succeeded or failed. It doesn't really matter. It's logging it anyways, right? In this case. Okay, here we're just using the filter log. Now, if those particular options aren't enough for you, there's actually an advanced audit policy configuration where you can drill down and do more fine-grained stuff. Okay, so if we just, I'll just go okay to this. If you forget about this area here and you just scroll all the way down, still under security, but all the way down to advanced security policy, you're going to find a lot more. Okay. Where each section has subsections within it that you can play around with and turn on and turn off. Log on and log off, object access, policy changes, the use of privileges. So if you ever have to use a UAC elevation, like all of these things, you can get pretty fine grained here. Okay. Uh, Now, what we're going to do for the assignment is basically choose. I want to make you kind of walk around the neighborhood of audit policy and choose a couple of settings that will achieve a particular end. You know, it's not going to be complete. It's just going to be kind of giving it a look over and getting the idea of how to turn them all on and what effect they have and making the decision about which one does what. Okay. Uh, Now, when it comes to domain controllers, because that's what we were working on here, you've got local logs and you have domain controller logs. And the domain controller logs, um, they handle anything related to authentication on the domain, right? So if you're dealing with permissions and it's at the local level on a machine, it's not going to go out to the DC to check those permissions unless the user is a domain user, and then there will be some verification, right? But if it's a local account, it's never going to reach the DC to do any kind of logging, right? The other thing is, though, even if it is a domain account, it's going to verify against a domain controller, right? But you may have multiple domain controllers, like in Capstone. And if you have multiple domain controllers, the location where this event is going to be logged will be on the domain controller that's actually giving a response to the client. Okay. And so you have this kind of distributed set of logs which you may have to worry about. So if somebody's trying to access an object, or like let's just say a folder, they're a domain user, you have to know which DC they actually authenticated against, right? Uh, and so you either have to hop around from DC to DC to find whether there's an entry there, or you have to aggregate your logs. And you can aggregate your logs through subscriptions, where you can, a machine can, a DC can basically say, I want to get all your logs as well. Okay. So that kind of what that it'll increase the logging activity of the DC in question. So you do have to kind of decide if that's something that you want to do. But if you're not going crazy with it, it's probably not going to be too much of a burden. Okay. If you're turning on like folder access for large amounts of the file system, on a lot of systems, that's going to make your DCs jump up and down. Okay, it's going to slow down their performance, and it's going to cause a heck of a lot of entries in the log file, which is going to cause them to be recycled quicker, right? And so then you have a narrower window for actually noticing that there's a problem and still having those log entries available. So you have to decide if that's how far you want to go. You can always increase the size limit of the logs that you're keeping so that they don't recycle too quickly. This is all part of typical sysadmin log maintenance. Okay. So it's really a question of what you're willing to do in order to have all that information available to you. Most of the time, sysadmins go with the defaults and they ramp up and massage the values if they think there's something going on, you know? And that could be a security incident, but it could also be odd behavior in your environment, like authentication failures occurring, where you want to understand why is it that this application is failing all the time. You can increase the logging level to get a little bit more detail. Okay. So the subscription widget, that would allow you to get logs from other DCs, so that one DC could be the one-stop shop that you go to drill down and get all this information. Okay, now the exercise, like I said, lemon squeezy. This is going to be very simple. It's worth 5%. There's 5 marks associated with it. Uh, I want you to just explore the different audit policies that are there and identify, create a group policy that will audit, and then we put in quotes events that are generated whether a computer validates the credentials of an account for which it is authoritative. When that's in quotes, you should be looking for that in the description of the policy. Okay, so it's not a huge mystery. It's actually laid out there somewhere. Excuse me. But you do have to look at the descriptions, and that will give you a sense of which one they're talking about. Okay. So we want you to define success and failure on the one that matches this, and the goal here is to get you to look through the descriptions a little bit. Okay. So take a screenshot of the policy that will do this. Don't forget that could be in general audit policy, and that could be in the advanced audit policy. Okay. Then you're going to need a Windows 10 client. So this is going to be on your domain controller. You want a Windows 10 computer. You want to log in, but use the incorrect password, then use the correct password. And then we want to see uh, where the success and failure is occurring. Okay. This should be a domain account, not a local account, because the local account won't go to the DC. Okay. Now, perform several successful and unsuccessful login attempts against your Windows 10 machine with 2 more domain users. Uh, and then back on your domain controller, create a filter list that'll show only those entries. Okay. So that's just custom filters. You've done that before a little bit, or we've talked about it at least. And then create an audit policy. And again, we're doing it in quotes, which means it's something you should be able to find in the descriptions. A policy that specifically allows you to audit distribution group management. Then we want you to go and manipulate a distribution group, and then take a screenshot of uh, the log file essentially that shows that this was done. Okay, that somebody made a change and it's being registered in the event logs. And so that's going to be 2 marks. So there's possibility for part marks on that one. Okay. Any questions about this? You could do this in, I think, 30 minutes probably. An hour if you're feeling really lackadaisical. So, okay. Well, that's the easy exercise that we've got before you go into your break. So I don't think I have you guys after this. So enjoy your time off. Hopefully you just kind of chill out a little bit. Maybe try and get this done today, and then it's off your plate. But you have time, so even if you don't do anything during the break, you can come back and finish it up. Okay. Okay. Have a good one, guys.